Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to ignite the fire for a brand new top 10 video for the 10th day of Skylanders. Skylanders was a franchise worked on by very passionate developers who poured heart and soul into every nook and cranny of these games, especially its playable characters. As these characters were being 3D printed and made into toys, they had to make sure that every aspect of the character was detailed and textured. These games soon became synonymous with not only original character designs, but ones made with excellent quality and a fine attention to detail. You could look at any Skylander figurine and find massive amounts of intricate details, which helped make the Skylander unique, set it apart from others, and it really just made the toys stand out on shelves as a result. Even when I shove bias aside, it's easy to say that Skylanders are the Toys to Life products with the most detail poured into them. From head to toe, they are covered in intricate details, as I've said already, but this would go one step further to include colour shading and materials to make the character gleam, or have even added realism so that then those excellent textures I talked to you about earlier would make you want to pick up these figurines and play with them as toys, kind of the whole purpose of making toys out of them in the first place, really. It was so difficult to narrow down which 10 Skylanders exactly have the best attention to detail, but I think the 10 I have for this list are the finest examples of these incredibly talented developers going above and beyond, slaving over these characters for months on end to truly flesh out these toys and their in-game counterparts to a level no other Toys to Life figurines can possibly comprehend of reaching. This list is not only based on how incredible the physical toys are, but also how those details on the figurine are translated into the game. So characters with an added layer of depth when it comes to the detail in the games are given a boost on this list. But now of that having been said and done, let's roll that intro and then get into the top 10 at hand. For number 10, I have Hothead. The shade of red and orange are a little too similar, as such the figurine doesn't have a sharp colour contrast to help it stand out, but that adds a realistic feel, which is what I admire when it comes down to the detail this character possesses. The animations for his character in-game are also really detailed. The transformation becomes believable when you're actually able to see the parts which physically transform in order for Hothead to become a motorcycle. You see these parts on the shoulders and the hands, plus you can see all around the figurine the contrast between the rock and the hot lava holding it all together. These cracks add an extra level of detail to the figurine, and they're textured to give this effect when you rub your fingers along the figurine as well. This effect isn't only in his chest, but it carries over to the arms, the legs, and even the hip. The developers really didn't need to go to this level of depth, and yet they did so anyway, which is why Hothead gets number 10 on the list. You can expect senseis to pop up frequently on this list, as these characters are synonymous with their toy quality and attention to detail. In fact, it's one of the highest praises reviewers and players alike gave to Imaginators upon the launch of the game. It really made their price tags worth it, because each one felt like a display piece worth having pride over, and Flair Wolf was no exception. His clothing and his fur have different textures. You can see the fur patterns and the patterns in the material on his clothing, and they add to the idea for clothing having an insulating feeling due to the textures, so the heat coming off of Flair Wolf's body could be kept under control, hence why there's that insulation type feeling behind it and the importance behind that. But his feet aren't covered and therefore don't seem to have their own isolation, which causes a scorched footprint to be left behind on the ground as you run in the game, which is a fine attention to detail for the figurine's in-game counterpart, mind you. There is even a scarf which is moulded to look like wind is blowing against it, so it's reacting like a scarf would. It doesn't bend easily due to the shape and material used on the figurine, which is excellent. Again, another good toy quality. The tail is plastic, so it's got a contrast and texture to the rest of the figurine, and rather than being simply just orange, it has yellow tints to make the tail truly look as though it's made of fire. There's even a fire-inspired pattern embodied into the arm guards, so that's a really great reflection of Flair Wolf's element. All 360 degrees of this character have details, even where it's not required, and we haven't even got to the best part yet. The bazooka possesses a Chinese dragon which wraps around it. It has scales and limbs which reflect what dragons in Chinese culture actually look like. and the texturing is so much fun to rub your finger along. The dragon head has pupils, a snout and teeth, the hands have claws. These tiny embodiments don't need to be added, and both sides of the bazooka have one end of the rocket's shell that Flair Wolf fires off in-game. Even the tip of Flair Wolf's nose is painted, so not a single speck of Flair Wolf's figurine is left without detail. Number 8 is High Volt. Again, he doesn't have a strong colour contrast, but as soon as you observe this figurine up close, you start to notice all his intricate little details. He has chips and scratches along his armour from years of police work managing huge riots. These chips and scratches aren't just simply painted on, you feel the cuts and scrapes on the texturing when you rub your hands along the figurine. The text symbol on the shoulder pads has small imperfections to make it look as though it was hand painted on. The armour is assembled by nuts and bolts, which again have increments on the physical figurine, which makes them feel more real as they're not just painted on. Overall, it's the line work within the shapes and the painting of this figurine which gives High Volt's armour a very personal feeling, as though it's handcrafted to express his personality, and that once again is a level of detail the developers didn't need to go to, and yet they did so anyway. Number 7 is Drobot, who has the same highlights as High Volt. His armour isn't just painted, it has physical increments, which makes the armour feel handmade as you rub your hand along it, which is important for the identity of Drobot's character, as he did hand make his armour from a box of scraps on a desert island as per his backstory. Drobot
was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps! Well, I'm sorry.
Drobot. These machine parts highly contrast the rest of his figurine, and his dragon parts are given a different texture entirely to the green and brown to make it seem as though those colours come from a vulnerable and flesh-like skin rather than his technological armour. You can also see the scales and roughness of the flesh to add further to this illusion, as well as the texturing of the figurine, mind you. So Spyro's Adventure was the first game, yet they still were only just starting out with 3D printing technology, and they came swinging straight off of the gates with a character like this one. But Drobot won't be the only Spyro's Adventure representative on this list, because we also have Double Trouble, whose wooden mask has increments on it to make it feel hand carved. There are lines and chips to represent the wooden texture. The feathers smoothly transition into a darker colour. They don't just immediately change from white to black. It flows within the colour palette. Even for back, you can see the muscles from his back. The arm guards look handcrafted as well due to the subtle paint imperfections. And the bottom of the figurine again looks like it's made of feathers, as they have these patterns of feathers and it's textured to feel as such when you rub your fingers along it. The staff has fingers and claws of its own. It could have just been a simple wooden staff, but they painted and textured the ends to look like fingers grasping the green orb, which has a slight gleam to it to help make it look as though the beam would actually emanate from it. Speaking of beams, within the game you actually see Double Trouble's eyes pop up and brighten in colour as the beam is being fired. This comedic effect gives the character much more personality, and it didn't need to be created for the in-game counterpart, as creating that would have took a lot of extra effort, but the developers took that extra step to flesh out the detail of the character even further because they were simply that passionate about these games. All of these reasons is why Double Trouble has earned the number 6 slot on this list. Number 5 is Aurora, whose intricate details both build her character and display her as an aesthetically very unique character. The way her swords twist and gleam is unlike any other sword design. It makes them look sharper and more intimidating. The entire figurine literally sparkles because of glitter placed all over the figurine, and her clothing has depth and cuts made to it to give it a handmade type feeling. The way it sways make it seem all the more realistic, as though it's being brushed by the wind or something. The textures on her leg guards are excellent. You really feel the material as you rub your thumb along it, making her armour feel tough and effective. The gold on the edge of the sleeve even curls to make it look as though the sleeves truly do hang from Aurora's arms, as they're too big for her. Just like the swords, that's a really unique costume design. But easily my favourite part to the costume are the front and the back, as each have an incredible, small and detailed pattern. The back pattern is symmetrical and incredibly neat to look at, and it really does satisfy your senses, that's for sure. It has actual depth on the figurine too. It's not just painted on, so you can feel it on the textures as you rub your fingers along it. The sleeves are soft to the touch as well, which adds to the satisfying detail in the sleeves as they hang off her arms. But moving along to the front of Aurora's costume, this is for character defining detail. Aurora is Eon's niece. To display that Aurora is proud of her family heritage and to showcase that she feels as though her uncle is always with her in battle, is through Aurora's pattern of Eon on her chest. Again, this is textured so you can actually feel it when physically handling the figurine. But what adds further to this pattern is the gem on Eon's head. They took the extra step and actually bothered to colour this, so the blue from the gem stands out from the rest of the face, which is also incredibly expressive despite being so small. You get all of the features you would expect from the face and features that are important, and they stand out from one another, which would include the eyes, nose, mouth, even the eyebrows, and most importantly, that glorious facial hair. Again, it's an attention to detail which is really impressive, and the developers didn't need to go to this level of depth. They just did so anyways because they were that passionate about it. Number 5 is Starcast, who's seriously detailed from head to toe. Some of these details would surprise you. Firstly, he's well textured and the clothing feels authentic because again, you feel the material in his shorts as you rub your fingers along it, thanks to the texturing of the figurine. The gloves do the same thing, the patterns are embodied into the gloves rather than simply painted on, and it's satisfying to the touch. The blue contrasts from the rest of the figurine very well and helps the colours really pop so that Starcast can stand out on the shelf. His shoes have the slots for only 2 toes rather than them being generic boot shapes. It feels as though the shoes are uniquely moulded to his feet. The 4 stars also have embodied patterns to make them feel more cosmic, as it's a detail they didn't need to add, so he easily could have just had gold painted throwing stars of one colour, but they added the patterns to the stars anyway to make the figurine textured and more fun to play around with physically, as well as add an extra detail to the throwing stars themselves. You can barely tell the patterns are the same because each one is situated at a different angle to one another, so the pattern in the northwest position of one star is different to the pattern in the northwest position on another star. It's another extra layer added to the details which wasn't necessary, and yet the developers went on ahead and added it anyway. Even both sides of the throwing stars have the patterns as well, so there wasn't a single part of the figurine covered that didn't have this intricate detail added to it. But we still haven't even covered the best part yet. Starcast's chest and back have no clothing because his skin has this galactic feeling. The plastic is slightly translucent, making it seem as though you're peering into open space. The stars have different shades and sizes to make it look as though they're all at different depths from one another, and it truly looks like there is an entire galaxy within Starcast's body. These details are so unique to Starcast, and it's awesome to see just how in-depth they went for this singular figurine, and they fleshed out every single layer of detail. Now that is something to admire. Number 3 is Fiesta, who has such an intricate amount of detail behind his design that I have gone on ahead and wrote an entire essay to justify his 3rd place position here. So Fiesta has a design which is one of the best, and the developers did a great job bringing detail to this design. First of all, his skeleton isn't white, it's a light blue colour, as you can tell from his hands, which have embodiments to show the actual physical bone, which adds an extra layer of depth. The light blue contrasts the white in his head, showcasing that the white isn't actually his skull. Instead, it's a helmet, which is why he has a strap around his jaw, and this makes sense. His car is a literal open coffin. You don't want to be launched out of that without a crash helmet at the bare minimum. Fiesta ironically promotes safety to ensure that you don't wind up as the undead. Around the eyes on the mask are red patterns that remind me of flowers. Flowers used during Dias de las Muertas to guide dead ancestors to their families' ofrendas. This references the very same culture Fiesta is based off. This detail makes that culturally enriching fact all the more evident. This helmet also has red patterns where the eyebrows usually would be, which is needless but comedic in detail. It makes his face feel more complete and expressive. It's also ironic because eyebrows is one thing skeletons don't have. Another unnecessary detail they added was a red pattern where the strap meets the helmet, which again works as a nice colour contrast to help the figurine pop and stand out on the shelf. The belt buckle has a tiny undead symbol on it. showing an embrace of Fiesta's element. The chest has the same red pattern as the eyes, so it's kind of like the top of jacket pockets. The only part missing is the actual pocket part, but the jacket still has lines and creases to show where it fits tight to Fiesta's bones. The trumpet itself has detailed embodiments which are textured, so again you feel it as you rub your fingers along it. What could have been a simple weapon now possesses mountains upon mountains of detail, as this pattern going around the trumpet is visible on the trumpet's base, its edge, and in the middle, so it's not just a single pattern at that, and it, like I said earlier, wraps all the way around, so it takes advantage of the physicality of the figurine. You see every part of that trumpet, so every part of that trumpet is naturally detailed. Even the hand gripping the trumpet showcases that each finger has slightly different lengths, the index finger being the longest as it wraps around the trumpet for most. This is a reflection of real life biology and a truly outstanding degree of detail. His trousers have lines running down them, a common pattern for tracksuit bottoms, which makes Fiesta's clothing seem more appropriate as it feels like a mariachi's uniform for a band performance in Mexico. His boots have a golden base to them, showcasing where the two materials for these boots come together to form the entire shoe. It also has ankle pieces to make noise to create a rhythm. This is seen when he taps his boot in-game, and it's a fine attention to detail. The final detail is Fiesta's sombrero, which again has embodiments on its front and back which are textured, so you literally feel the effort put into making this figurine incredibly detailed. The red and black colour choice is appropriate for the element and really fits in well with the rest of the design, so the sombrero stands out, whilst also feeling like an integral part of the figurine. The black pattern isn't a simple one either, so in other words it's not just a circle, they have actual like edges to it, and the shape is just satisfying to look at. It's symmetrical too, which is just all the more satisfying to the eye. The edge is also thicker, just like an actual sombrero. It's moulded at the top so it would fit onto Fiesta's head, not fall off, and the little chips within the hat showcase its age as it's starting to fall to pieces, and it's another excellent layer of detail which didn't need to be there, and yet developers took the time to add it anyway. I'm saying that a lot today, but it's important to emphasize these things as it's proof firsthand just how truly passionate these developers were for these games and these characters. But moving along to number 2 without further ado, we have chain reaction. Literally every aspect of this character is detailed. He notoriously has one of the best Skylander designs for its creativity, as bicycle chains make up his beard, and this creativity would be nothing if not for the outstanding detail drawing attention upon this. You can physically make out where one chain ends and another one begins. The chains are rusted to different degrees depending upon where they fall on chain reaction's face. The chains that make up his mustache have an extra layer to them, so again you can make it out from the rest of the face. You can tell it's meant to be a mustache, and it also helps that they're situated between the nose and the mouth. There is a text symbol and dots along his headpiece, which looks like molded metal, as lines are created where the pieces of metal would be molded together, and those dots are bolts to help secure the metal. There is even a dot in the middle of a text symbol to show what's holding an extra layer of metal in place, as the text symbol once again is a textured embodiment of the headpiece. The developers wouldn't cop out now, not for the tech element symbol, so once again you can actually feel the textures as you rub your fingers along it. The chainsaw's chain reaction dual wields as weapons also share this sheer attention to detail with the chains, and the middle parts have their own textured embodiments to make them feel as though they are real chunks of metal coming together to form this machinery. The chainsaws have blades along their edges too, which you can feel as you rub your fingers along them, so that adds to the overall intimidation of the character. So if his design isn't enough to entice you to play as him, the intimidation factor behind this figure certainly would be. The back of this character's shirt has lines added to it to show how the shirt wraps around and loosely fits off of him. The arms have lines and little dots to show where the bolts came in to build up his metal arms and create realistic looking muscles out of metal. All his guards are either bolted down or kept in place by chains wrapping around his body. The entire figurine is themed around these ideas, making everything feel fitting for the character and consistent in their makeup. The shoes even have a metallic design, and the insoles have lines running along them. It's the same pattern you would actually find on metal panels themselves. So overall, these designs are really intricate, but consistent over the entire figurine to give a satisfying, uniformed feel, which is unique to Chain Reaction design, making his figurine even more admirable as these details truly bring out the creativity of the design behind this character. But there is no Skylander more detailed than Washbuckler. Atop this character's head is a pirate do-rag. Pirates would put their hair into these nets so their hair wouldn't snag on things around the ship, and often pirates didn't want their hair to be seen, as occasionally they were women which snuck onto pirate ships despite being barred from them by male pirate captains. Yes, the detail behind this character here is historically significant, even if Washbuckler isn't a woman. Of course, there were other reasons for these pirate do-rags, but they were effectively uniform to pirates during their time, as are the pirate hats, which Washbuckler also possesses, with the shape, proportions and colours to match historically significant pirate hats as well, so it's accurate, and the colour contrast between the blue and the gold really pops to once again help Washbuckler stand out amongst the crowd on the shelf. But the hat also has lines where creases and scratches would have developed, so it gives the hat an aging feeling, which is really cool to observe, and the detail is completely unnecessary, but it's used to breathe additional life into this magnificent figurine. The shirt has lines and textures to show creases where the shirt would wrap around and fit loosely upon Washbuckler's vest. The vest meets the shirt on the chest. The gold colour and embodiments upon the edge of the shirt make the two pieces of clothing stand out from one another and replicate historically accurate pirate uniforms. The belt actually goes over the shirt, and the shirt continues underneath the belt, making the shirt become tighter the lower down the body it gets, and the shirt is actually tucked below the belt, as the belt is the one thing preventing the shirt from becoming too loose, so all you'll see is Washbuckler's vest underneath it. The belt has a textured line wrapped around it, making it both realistic as well as satisfying to the touch. His golden arm guards have lines to make the metal seem all the more realistic, and the end of the fingers have suction cups instead of nails, as this is accurate to octopi, which is the species Washbuckler is obviously based on. His sword has a satisfying symmetrical pattern which is embodied upon the handle, and it's textured to the figurine itself. The sword has its fair share of detail as well. There is a line showcasing the actual blade in the sword, the rest of it wouldn't be sharp. There is even a chip in the sword from general wear and tear. Makes sense as the rest of the figurine is aging from Washbuckler's experience, so the sword must have that effect as well. The eyebrow shape and size of the eyes themselves help the figurine display Washbuckler's determined personality, but my favourite part of the detail is the sheer number of legs Washbuckler has. He has 6 legs upon the base, and when you add his 2 arms to this number, it makes for 8 limbs, the same number of legs that an octopi would have. And of course, when we go back to the 6 tentacles upon the base, these 6 tentacles fill the base in a very satisfying way as they twirl into a nice pattern, and one even sits into a spiral to stand out. You can see the more lightly coloured underside and the suction cups on the tentacles. The texture is fun to rub your fingers along, and it's another added layer to make the design all the more shockingly realistic. In game, these suction cups even leave behind markings to add to the realism behind this character, and it's funny to see little suction marks right where you've been, so now Washbuckler has that additional comedic element to his design as well. The mustache even acts as a tentacle in its own right, because it has the same, more lightly coloured underside and suction cups to call its own, but the bottom of the mouth doesn't have any suction cups, showing that the tentacle only makes up the mustache, a fine contrast indeed. This sheer amount of detail he possesses deems him worthy of being number 1 on this list, in my personal opinion, mind you. But I wouldn't dare end off this video without an ensemble shot of our 10 winners. Given that all 167 unique Skylanders have incredible amounts of detail in their own right, it was unbelievably difficult to limit this list to just 10 characters. So let me know how wrong I am in the comment section below. Just please be sure to be respectful of one another's opinions. With all that being said, this video is coming to an end. Let's roll that outro without further ado. I cannot, in good conscience, end off this video without first thanking all of my incredible channel members whose continued support help make these videos possible. Without them, these videos would be near impossible to make, so from the bottom of my heart, I truly appreciate every last one of them. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, there are plenty of options on screen now to explore, and please consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content. On that note, this video is coming to an end, so thank you so much as always for watching. Until the next video arises, peace!